purpose of this video is to review over the anatomical structures of the common biological specimen, the frog. The frog is a short-bodied, tailless amphibian composing the order Anura. The body plan of an adult frog is generally characterized by having a stout body, protruding eyes, Nerys that are on the anterior-most structure of the frog, a cleft tongue which is attached at the front of the mouth, limbs folded underneath, and the absence of a tail. Besides living in fresh water or on dry land, some adult frog species are adapted for living under trees or underground. The skin of the frog is glandular with secretions ranging from distasteful to toxic, and the warty species of the frog tends to be called the toad. However, the distinction between frog and toad is based on an informal, conventional train of thought as opposed to a taxonomical history, with the frogs being more water-based, having more of a wet skin, where the toads have a warty appearance and a drier skin. The life cycle of the frog is closely tied to the water. The frogs will typically lay their eggs in the water. The eggs hatch into aquatic larvae called tadpoles. These tadpoles have tails and internal gills. The life cycle is completed when the tadpoles metamorphosize into adults. The adult frog typically has a carnivorous diet consisting of small invertebrates. Additionally, the frog is an indicator species, and abnormalities in the frog can be an indication of something going on in nature. Now, when we look at the anatomy of the frog, the first thing we want to look at is going to be the eyesight, or the eyes of the frog. The eyes are bulging out, and they are on either side of the head. This allows for the eyes to provide binocular vision over a field of 100 degrees. The eyes have both an upper and a lower eyelid that will close. In addition to that, they have a covering over the eye called the nictitating membrane, which helps protect the eye during swimming. In addition to the sight, right behind the eyes, we have the tympanic membrane. Frogs can hear both in the air and below water. They do not have an external ear, but they do have this eardrum structure called the tympanic membrane. The frogs have various calls or croaks, and the croaks are unique for each species and can be used to ward off other frogs or to act as a mating call. Typically speaking, the frogs are considered excellent jumpers, and some can leap over 2 meters in distance, which is more than 50 times their body length. Now that means that their back legs are designed as their jumping legs with shorter front forelegs. While it is difficult to determine male from female on an external examination, there are clues to indicate that a frog could be a male. And one of the things we want to look at is an enlarged thumb. And that enlarged thumb would be present on the males. It would help aid the males in reproduction. So when you're examining the frog, it may be difficult to determine male from female, but you could have some indication by checking out the thumbs of the frogs, the thumbs being larger in the males than in the females. When one begins dissecting the frog, we must first consider some various directional terminology. Towards the head is called the anterior surface. Towards the tail or tushy area is the posterior. The belly side is the ventral. The back side is the dorsal. So when we begin the dissection, we lay the frog on its dorsal surface with the belly or ventral surface up. We will take our scissors and we will clip the skin, and we will clip up this way, and we'll clip across and across each side, and this will allow us to take the skin off, very similar to a jacket. Now we'll also clip around, and we will pull the skin off of the legs very much like we would pull pants off of an individual. Here we have that first cut where we've cut across, and we would just peel the skin right off, and then we would clip around and just pull the skin down off over the legs, and we would have our frog skinned. Do notice that the skin is highly vascularized, and so you can see a lot of blood vessels running through that very thin skin. Now this is because the frog breathes in a couple of ways. It does have very simple lungs that are like air sacs, but it also has cutaneous breathing as well, or absorbing oxygen through its skin. Now that the frog has been skinned, we can begin looking at the musculature of the frog. Now, I cannot expect you to learn all of the muscles of the frog, but there are key structures that I do want you to be aware of. Again, we can see the Nerys located at the anterior-most structure. Now, this is important for when the frog is below water. The nose and the eyes would both be above water so that the frog can breathe and can see around the environment. So we have the Nerys, we have the eyes, we have the tympanic membrane, which is for hearing. We have the latissimus dorsi located right here and here. The longissimus dorsi is located along the length of the back. Along the sides is the external oblique. The lower part of the mouth is called the mandible. The upper part of the mouth is the maxillae. Right in this area we would have the frontalis portion. And that's really what we want you to be aware of on this particular diagram. Here again we have the latissimus dorsi. We can see the triceps brachii on the back of the forearms. The longissimus dorsi running the length of the back. Again, remember that this is the dorsal surface. On each of the sides we have the external obliques. Here we have the triceps femoris, named because it has 3 insertions. In the middle is the biceps femoris, followed by the semimembranosus. The gracilis minor runs right across here. We see the gluteus muscle running here and right across there. The opening here is the cloaca. The large calf muscle is called the gastrocnemius. Where it attaches at the bottom is the Achilles tendon. Running right across here we have the peroneus longus. In between the peroneus longus and the gastrocnemius you'll feel the bone that is the tibialis. And this right here is actually called the tibiofibula on the frog, where we have a fusion of the two bones. On this view, again, we can see the triceps femoris with the biceps femoris right here. Again, the large calf muscle is the gastrocnemius. Attaching down at the bottom would be the the Achilles tendon. Right here we have those gracilis muscles. Moving up on this side, we can see the gluteus muscle. Again, the large calf muscle, gastrocnemius, Achilles tendon. Right along here we would have our tibiofibula, and that's a bone, and then the peroneus longus. This is the ventral view of the frog. Right up in here we have the muscle known as the mylohyoid. Right up across the top we would have our deltoid muscle on each side. Here we have the pectoralis muscle. This number 13 is pointing to the linea alba. The side right in here, and over on this side right in there we have the external oblique. Running down the center we have the rectus abdominis. On the outer edge is the triceps femoris, followed by the longest muscle of the body right in here, known as the sartorius. In this area right there we have the adductor magnus, we have the gastrocnemius, and the Achilles tendon. Here we have the mouth of the frog opened wide, and there are several key structures we would like for you to notice. First of all, you'll notice that this area right here and right here is associated with the eyes of the frog, so the eyes can come back into the socket area or can be pushed up to bulge out. That the frog has 2 types of teeth. Right here and here are the volar teeth, and running right across here and around are the maxillary teeth. Now the frog uses the teeth to hold the prey and then to gulp it down. It does not use the teeth for chewing. You'll have the openings to the Nerys located right there and over to the side there. Here we have the openings of the Eustachian tube, which would lead straight back to the tympanum. The esophagus is right here. This is the glottis, which would open down into the trachea and would go down into the lungs. Additionally, the tongue has been removed. However, the tongue is attached at the front part of the mouth so that it can roll its tongue outward to capture its prey. Here we see the internal anatomy of the frog. We'll begin right up in here. The frog has a 3-chambered heart. It has 1 ventricle and 2 atrium, 1 atrium on each side. Right down here we have the very simple lungs. They are simple sacs. The frogs cannot get all of their respiratory needs from just the simple lungs. So it also has a cutaneous breathing, which is breathing through the skin, and then pulmonary breathing, which is breathing through the lungs. The largest organ of the body is the liver, and we can see the liver across here. If we raise the liver, the green sac underneath the liver is the gallbladder. This yellow that we see is known as fat bodies, and this is where it stores its fat. So this was a nice plump frog. Right here, we can see that J-shaped stomach. And so those are the key structures that this particular diagram has available for you. As with the previous slide, we can see our 3-chambered heart right up in here. Now, the liver has been removed to show some various structures. We still see our fat bodies. We can see that nice J-shaped stomach, the stomach going right into the intestines and moving on down. Now, the small intestines is here. The large intestines we begin to see right along here, and that's called the colon. And then you're probably wondering, what is all this material right there? Well, those are eggs. And so here we're looking at a female frog. Now this is a male frog. And I know this is a male frog because I see this structure right here. And this is called a vestigial oviduct. Now in a female, we would have our oviducts, our fallopian tubes attached to ovaries. But here we have a vestigial oviduct, and it's the remnants of an oviduct structure on a male frog. So reviewing over the internal anatomy before we move on, you will notice that the frog has a trilobed liver. It's the largest organ in the body. Underneath the liver is the green sac known as the gallbladder. Moving down, we have that J-shaped stomach. Right here and right here we can see the 2 simple air sacs that are the lungs. We have the mesentery that helps to hold the organs in place. Underneath the stomach we have the pancreas. Pancreas is both an endocrine and an exocrine gland. The fat bodies typically will appear yellow, and it's where the material is stored for the frog, so this is their fat content. As we move from the stomach, we move into the small intestines. The first part of the small intestines is called the duodenum. Moving from the small intestines, we move to the large intestines. Now both the large intestines and the bladder will empty their waste into the cloaca. The spleen is typically a red structure, and you'll find it right along with the mesentery. Now, not pictured in here, but retroperitoneal, or behind the peritoneal cavity, and behind all of these organs, you will find the kidney. And the kidney is the primary organ of excretion. On top of the kidney are glands known as adrenal glands, and they will appear as patches on the kidney on the frog. And on the previous slide, you were able to see the vestigial oviduct, which is that non-functioning structure in the male frog, and it resembles the oviduct in the female frog. And if you'll just review over these structures, you should have the anatomy of the frog down. Here we have a beautiful picture showing some of the structures and blood vessels around the heart of the frog. Now we'll begin with this being a 3-chambered heart with our very large lower chamber called the ventricle. Our upper chambers are the right and left atria of the heart, or atrium. Now do remember that when you're working with a frog, you're working with the frog's right and left and not your own. So this right here would be the right atrium and this would be the left atrium. Here we have the conus arteriosus, also called the truncus arteriosus, and that will lead right up into our aortic arches. Now that's not visible here, but the aortic arches would then branch off and lead to various other branches. One of the branches that would go up to the head is the carotid arch, and the carotid arch carries the blood to the head. We would have a systemic arch that would branch off and it would carry blood to the forelimbs. And then we would have a pulmonary cutaneous arch which would carry blood to the lungs and to the skin. The frog has a highly developed nervous system that consists of a brain, spinal cord, and nerves, and many parts of the frog's brain will correspond to those of the human. The frog's brain consists of 2 olfactory lobes, 2 cerebral hemispheres, a pineal body, 2 optic lobes, a cerebellum, and a medulla oblongata. The relative size of the cerebrum in the frog is much smaller than that in the human, and the frog has 10 pairs of cranial nerves as opposed to 12 which are found in the human body. Now let's point out the various anatomical structures found on a typical frog brain. So while viewing this brain, this would be our anterior or front of the brain. This would be our posterior or the back of the brain. Right in this area we'll have our olfactory bulbs. The olfactory bulbs are used for smell. Moving back we have the cerebrum located there and there. Right in this area we would find the frontal organ. Moving back just a tiny amount and not really visible here, but in that area would be the pineal gland. Located here are the large optic lobes. The cerebellum is right here. This is the 4th ventricle right along in here. And right here is the medulla oblongata. Here we have a section of frog blood. And this is amphibian blood. And so what is the difference between amphibian blood and mammalian blood? Well, you'll notice these dark purple dots within the red blood cells. These pink are our red blood cells, or the erythrocytes. And within them you will see a dark purple dot, which is the nucleus. So the amphibian blood contains red blood cells with a nucleus, which is visible as the dark purple dots in the center of each cell. And this is in contrast to the red blood cells of a mammal. Mammals' red blood cells do not have a nucleus. As we begin to look at the skeleton of the frog, the upper jawbone of the frog is called the maxillae. The bottom is called the mandible. Right in this area we have the nasal bone. Moving back, we have the frontoparietal bone. Do notice that we have quite a few bones that are fused together, unlike the bones of the human body. Right back here, we have the foramen magnum. As we continue, we can see our pectoral girdle across here. Our humerus is the upper arm bone. We can see that the radius and the ulna are fused to make one bone. And then we'll see our metacarpals and our carpals located in that area there, with the phalanges being the toes. As we move back, you'll see the vertebrae. So the vertebrae that's located right in the neck area is known as the cervical vertebrae. This right here would be the scapula or the shoulder blade. We do call it the pectoral girdle, but it's the scapula. When we look at the legs, to be very specific, we'll have our metacarpals, our carpals, and then our phalanges. Do notice that the frog does not have ribs. It does have vertebrae, but no ribs. Right here we have the ilium. Now the ilium has elongated and formed a mobile joint with the sacrum, which is located right in there. And this is specialized for jumpers. In addition to that, the tail vertebrae has fused into a urostyle, which is located right here, and that is retracted into the pelvis. This enables a force to be transferred from the legs to the body during a leap. When we continue down, we have the femur. Moving down, the tibia and the fibula and the tarsals have all been fused into a single strong bone, just like we had our radius and ulna fused right here. So again, we have our tibiofibula, and then we have our tarsals located here, with the calcaneal being this back one right across there. Our metatarsals, and then we have our phalanges elongated for swimming and for jumping.